For those of you who are always on the go, remember mindful moments.
Bite-sized knowledge, right?
Exactly. Perfect for those mental snacks throughout the day. Narrated by AI, too. What if everything we think we know about American democracy is wrong? Like, what if it's, I don't know, like a myth?
Whoa. Okay, that's
Yeah, that's kind of a
yeah.
provocative question.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today as we deep dive into Democracy Awakening.
Oh, very cool.
It's a book by Heather Cox Richardson, and it really takes a look at this tension between the ideals of equality and, the people in power who want to keep their power.
Oh, yeah.
So buckle up.
Okay.
Get ready to learn some shocking truths about American democracy.
I'm ready.
And yeah, let's jump in.
Okay.
So one of the things that Richardson does really well in this book is she doesn't shy away from calling out these contradictions.
Right.
Right? Like she starts with the Declaration of Independence, which says all men are created equal.
Right.
But then she's like, hold on a second.
Right.
That wasn't really true for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about the book is that she does start there, like you said, with the Declaration of Independence, this like really bold statement. And then she's like, but let's look at who it applied to. And it was a very narrow group of people.
Right.
It was white men who owned property.
So right from the beginning,
Yeah.
there's this gap between like what America says it is and what it actually is.
Exactly. And she calls that the central contradiction of American history.
So this gap, right,
Yeah.
between what America says it is and what it actually
Yeah.
is a theme that we're going to see again and again and again.
Yeah, and it fuels a lot of the tension in American history. It's, a struggle between this promise of equality and then those who are in power and trying to maintain their power and control.
So you have on one hand the people who are saying, hey, we want equality, and you have the people in power who are like, no, 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 I like things how they are.
Right, exactly. It's this constant back and forth between progress and pushback.
And this isn't something that Richardson just looks at in the past, right? She connects this to the rise of authoritarianism, which is something that is really important to look at, I think, if we want to understand where America is today.
Absolutely.
So why is it so important to understand authoritarianism?
Well, because it's crucial for recognizing the warning signs and fighting back, like understanding how it takes root, the tactics that it uses to kind of like undermine democracy. It's crucial.
So what is authoritarianism?
Authoritarianism at its core rejects the idea of equality, and it favors strict hierarchies. And a lot of times it manipulates history to justify why it's in power.
So it's not just about a single person or a political party.
Right.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
It's a way of looking at the world that is in direct conflict with the
Yeah.
ideas of democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
And these authoritarians, they don't just like pop up out of nowhere.
Right. They don't just seize power randomly.
We exploit anxieties and they exploit the fear of change.
Absolutely. So she really talks about how they appeal to those who feel left behind, those who feel disenfranchised by the system. And it's, a tactic that has been used time and time again throughout history.
It's like a playbook.
It is. It is a playbook. And so she outlines some of the key tactics of that playbook.
Okay, so give us some of these tactics. What's in this playbook? How do these authoritarians undermine democracy?
Well, she talks about, the use of misinformation and propaganda, to kind of control what people are thinking, right?
Control the narrative.
Yes, control the narrative and, shape public opinion.
And I feel like a great example of that is that Willie Horton ad from 1988.
Oh, yes, that's a prime example.
Which was incredibly effective.
It was.
And really scary.
Yes, very much so.
But Richardson's point is that it's not just this isolated incident, right?
Right.
This is part of a bigger...
It's a pattern.
Yeah, a bigger trend.
Yes.
And one of the things that she points to is the dismantling of the fairness doctrine in 1987.
Yes.
Now, for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with that, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So the fairness doctrine was this policy that required broadcasters to present contrasting viewpoints on controversial issues.
So basically...
It's a safeguard.
Yeah, it was supposed to protect against the spread of misinformation.
Right.
And when they got rid of it,
yeah, it really
opened the floodgates.
Yeah, it really opened up the floodgates for, partisan media.
Right.
The spread of misinformation.
And this leads to talk radio and Fox News and all of that.
Exactly.
And so do you think that getting rid of the fairness doctrine was on purpose? Like, do you think they were doing that so that they could spread this misinformation?
I mean, it's hard to say for certain, but the consequences were undeniable, right? Like you said, the rise of talk radio and later, Fox News, they created these echo chambers
Yeah.
where people were only getting one side of the story.
Right, and they were being fed.
And it made them, more susceptible to simplistic solutions.
Yeah, and these like...
Authoritarian promises of order.
Yeah, like a strong man who's going to come in and fix all the problems.
Right.
I mean, it reminds me of that phrase, flood the zone with shit.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Skip ahead in.
create chaos and confusion so that people just want someone to come in and like fix it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not just about like outright lies and propaganda.
Right.
Richardson also talks about things like gerrymandering and voter ID laws.
Yes.
Which are like, on the surface, they sound kind of like boring bureaucratic things.
Yeah.
But really, they're designed to stop certain people from voting.
Exactly. And they often target minority voters.
So they're framed as like, we just want to make sure everything is fair and square.
Right.
But really, it's just about keeping certain people from voting.
Exactly.
And then there's the media. Like all of the talk radio and reality TV and stuff like that really contributed to the erosion of democratic norms.
Yes.
Because, it's all about outrage. All about sensationalism.
Sensationalism.
It's not about like nuance.
Right.
It's not about facts.
Exactly. And that's what she argues, right? It's like it becomes more about entertainment.
Yeah.
And outrage than it is about factual reporting or nuanced debate.
And if people aren't getting the facts,
right?
If people aren't thinking critically,
yes,
democracy can't really function.
And that's incredibly dangerous for a functioning democracy because it undermines people's ability to think critically and make, informed decisions.
Right, because then it just becomes about your gut reaction.
Exactly.
And not about like what the facts are.
And that makes people more vulnerable to manipulation.
Yeah.
And exploitation, which is, what authoritarians rely on.
Yeah.
To get into power and to stay in power.
Right.
And it's not just a modern phenomenon, right? Like these tactics, Richardson argues that they've been used throughout American history.
Right.
To undermine progress and maintain these existing power structures.
Yeah, like keep people in power.
Yes.
Exactly.
And she looks at certain historical periods to show us how this happens over and over again.
Yeah, and she really digs deep into these key turning points, showing how these patterns repeat themselves time and again.
So where does she start? Like, what's one of the first places that she looks at to understand this?
One of the most critical periods, she says, is the Civil War and Reconstruction.
Yeah.
So, obviously the defeat of the Confederacy, that was a big turning point in the fight for equality.
Right.
But, it's like winning a war doesn't mean you win the battle of ideas.
That's a good point. So even though slavery was abolished, the ideas that made people think slavery was okay didn't just go away.
Right.
They stuck around.
Exactly. Like this persistence, right? The belief that, white people are superior.
Yeah.
That was the foundation of the Confederacy, right?
Yeah.
And that continued to fuel resistance to this democratic progress long after the Civil War ended.
And that resistance came in a lot of different forms.
It did.
Like the KKK.
Yes, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, Jim Crow laws.
Jim Crow laws.
All of this is about, like, stopping black people from having the same rights as white people.
Exactly. And it's like, they effectively resegregated the South.
Yeah.
And disenfranchised black voters.
And it reminds me of all those statues they put up, like, way after the Civil War was over.
Oh, yeah. The Confederate statues.
Yeah, it wasn't just about, like, oh, we want to remember our history. It was like sending a message about who's really in charge.
Exactly. Whose version of history is going to be remembered.
Yeah.
And that idea, that racial hierarchy, she argues that it never really went away. It morphed and it adapted.
Right.
But it was still there.
So how does she connect, like, the Civil War to what's going on today? Like, how is that still relevant?
She traces direct line from the Confederacy to the rise of movement conservatism.
Okay, now that's something that I think a lot of people might not even be familiar with.
Right.
So for our listener who doesn't know, what is movement conservatism? And how does it connect to this idea of, like, undermining democracy?
Okay, so movement conservatism. It emerged in the 1950s.
Okay.
And it was a direct response to the growing push for civil rights and social justice.
Right.
And these figures, like William F. Buckley Jr. and Barry Goldwater, they deliberately, they wanted to overturn this liberal consensus that had taken root after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it by using this powerful symbol, the rugged, individualistic cowboy.
It's interesting how they use that.
Yeah.
Because it's so, like, American.
Exactly. And that was like the genius of it, right? Like they repackaged the old Confederate ideology, but they did it for this new era. So they wrapped it up in this language of individual liberty and free markets, but they used this image, right, of this cowboy to promote this vision of limited government, traditional values, and a return to this, kind of mythical past where, white men were firmly in control.
So they're appealing to people's nostalgias.
Yes.
And, they're tapping into this fear that people have about change.
Absolutely.
But they're also pushing back against any attempts to make things more equal.
Exactly. And one of their most effective weapons was the media.
Right?
Remember we were talking about the dismantling of the fairness doctrine?
Yeah.
So that, coupled with the rise of talk radio and then later Fox News,
Yeah.
It allowed them to control the narrative.
Right.
And demonize their opponents.
Yeah, and they would use, outright lies.
Fear-mongering, all that.
Yeah, make people afraid.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting how she connects all of this, right? Like the Confederacy, this conservatism movement, the media.
Yes.
And it's not a very pretty picture.
No.
But she doesn't stop there.
She doesn't.
She goes on to talk about Trump.
She does, yeah.
And she says that, he really accelerated the erosion of democratic norms.
Yes, in a way that we haven't seen before.
So what did he do that was so different? I mean, there have always been presidents who, lie.
Right.
Use divisive rhetoric.
Yeah.
What made him so different?
Well, she argues that he took it to a whole new level. He openly attacked the media.
Yeah.
He embraced conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
He repeatedly made claims that were demonstrably false. But, she says his use of the big lie to sow doubt about the election results was particularly chilling.
Yeah.
It
That big lie, it really worked.
it did.
Like, there are still so many people who think that the election was stolen.
Right.
And it's like, how can you still believe that when there's so much evidence that it wasn't?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about these tactics of authoritarianism.
Right.
Right? Like, the big lie is a classic example of how, repeating a lie often enough can make it seem true.
Right.
Especially if it's repeated by people in positions of authority.
Yeah.
And amplified by this media ecosystem that's designed to just, reinforce existing beliefs.
Right. So it's not just about the lie itself.
That's right.
It's about, who's saying it.
Exactly.
And how often you hear it.
Exactly.
And Richardson's point is that, Trump using this big lie wasn't just about overturning the election.
Right.
It was about something much deeper.
Yes. She argues that it was about undermining faith in the democratic process.
Right.
Like making people question whether their vote even matters.
Yeah. And that's so dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous.
Because if people stop believing in the system,
right.
then they stop participating.
Yes, and that's exactly what authoritarians want.
Right.
They want to create this climate of cynicism and apathy.
Yeah.
Where people feel like their voices don't matter.
Yeah, like, why bother?
Right.
My vote doesn't count.
Right.
So how do we fight that? Like, how do we combat that? These tactics are so effective. What can we do?
That's the million-dollar question. Right. And she doesn't offer any easy answers, but she provides some valuable insight. Okay, so she argues that, understanding the historical context,
right,
that's crucial, recognizing these patterns, right, that have led us to this point.
Yeah.
Because it's about being prepared
right.
to confront them in the future.
So it's not just about fighting, one specific law or one specific politician.
Right.
It's about, recognizing that there's this deeper problem.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing those tactics that are being used to manipulate us.
Right.
Whether it's, disinformation or voter suppression or the exploitation of fear and division.
So be aware of it so that you can call it out and resist it.
Exactly.
But awareness isn't enough, right?
Right.
What else can we do?
Well, she argues that we need to reclaim our history.
What do you mean by that?
Understand the true story of America.
The good and the bad.
Yeah, warts and all, as they say.
All right.
Not the sanitized version that's taught in schools or promoted by those in power, but the real, messy, complicated story.
Yeah.
That includes everyone's voices, right?
Yeah.
Those who have been marginalized.
Right.
And silenced.
Because if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Exactly.
So it's not just about learning about history. It's also about being an active participant in our democracy.
Yes, absolutely.
Vote. Contact your elected officials. Get involved in your community.
Be an engaged citizen.
Yeah, make your voice heard.
Exactly.
Let those people in power know what you're thinking.
Yes. And don't underestimate the power of, like, collective action,
Yeah.
right? Like, join a protest,
Yeah.
volunteer for a campaign,
Yeah.
organize in your community.
Yeah.
You know, there's strength in numbers.
Right.
And when people come together and demand change, those in power, they listen.
It's about showing up and like being there and being present and reminding those people like, hey, you work for us.
Exactly.
And it's not just about national politics, right?
Oh.
Like local elections, local politics, that impacts our lives every single day.
Absolutely.
So pay attention to what's happening in your town,
Yeah.
your city,
Your backyard.
your backyard, and get involved.
Exactly.
What's one more thing people can do?
Oh, one last thing I would add is this idea of supporting organizations that are working to defend democracy and promote social justice.
That's right.
Right? Like, there are so many groups out there doing amazing work,
Yeah.
and they need our support now more than ever.
Yeah. So like, donate to a cause you care about, volunteer your time, spread the word.
Exactly. Every little bit helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
what's like the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with
Okay.
from all of this?
You know, if I had to choose just one, it would be this. American democracy is not a given. Like, it's not guaranteed. It's an ongoing experiment.
Right.
It demands our active participation
Yeah.
and our defense.
So we can't just assume that it's always going to be there.
We can't.
We have to work to protect it.
Yes, we have to fight for it.
Yeah.
We have to nurture it, and
Yeah.
we have to hold those in power accountable.
So well put. Richardson's book is just like this amazing call to action.
It is.
It's a reminder that the future of our nation, it's literally in our hands.
It is.
And it's up to all of us to decide, what kind of future we want to create.
So true.
So thank you for joining us on this part of our deep dive. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about some specific things that we can all do to help defend American democracy. Okay, so we talked about all these challenges to American democracy.
Yeah.
And it can be, kind of overwhelming.
Right.
But Richardson's book isn't just about, scaring us.
It's a call to action.
Yeah, it's about doing something.
Right.
So let's talk solutions.
Okay.
What can we all do to defend American democracy?
Well, Richardson emphasizes that we can't just be passive.
Yeah.
Like, we can't just sit back and watch this happen. We
Right.
have to participate,
Be engaged.
stay informed, hold our leaders accountable,
Yeah.
and fight for those principles, the principles that make a democracy work.
Okay, so let's get specific.
Okay.
What can our listener actually do, starting today?
Well, first and foremost, educate yourself.
Uh-huh.
Like, understand the issues.
Yeah.
Learn about the history.
Yeah.
And be aware of the tactics.
Right, how are they doing this?
Yeah, exactly.
How are they undermining democracy?
Right, and books like Democracy Awakening are a great starting point.
Yeah, reading is super important.
Yes.
But it's not just about books.
Yeah, absolutely not.
There are other ways to stay informed.
Definitely.
So what else can people do?
Pay attention to reliable news sources.
Okay, so not just anything you see on the internet.
Right, exactly.
Be careful about where you're getting your information from.
Yes, and, talk to people. Have conversations with people who see things differently than you do.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is.
But important.
But it's so important,
Because we all get stuck in our own little bubbles.
Yes, those echo chambers.
Yeah, we just hear what we want to hear.
Right, and that's dangerous. So
Yeah.
we need to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
So don't just take everything at face value.
Include.
Think critically about what you're seeing and hearing.
Yes, and, be open to changing your mind.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, when presented with new information.
So don't be afraid to say, hey, I was wrong about that.
Exactly.
Because we're all learning and growing, right?
We are.
Okay, so education, critical thinking, what else?
Participation.
Ooh, yeah, get involved.
Yes. Voting is crucial,
Obviously.
but it's not enough.
Right.
Contact your elected officials.
Okay.
Go to town hall meetings.
Yeah.
Get involved in organizations that are working on the issues you care about.
So actually get out there and do something.
Yes, make your voice heard.
Yeah, don't be silent.
Exactly.
Let those people in power know what you think.
Yes, and, collective action is so powerful.
Right, there's strength in numbers.
Exactly. So join a protest, volunteer for a campaign, organize in your community.
So show up, be present, make a difference.
Yes, remind those in power that they work for us, the people.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's not just about national politics, right?
No, it's about local politics, too.
Like school board elections.
Yes.
City council.
The mayoral races.
Yeah, all of that matter.
It all matters.
Because that's what shapes our communities.
Exactly.
So pay attention to what's happening in your backyard.
Yes.
Get involved locally.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Any other things people can do?
One last thing.
Okay.
Support those organizations out there.
Okay.
The ones that are doing the work to defend democracy and promote social justice.
Yeah, like put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
Support the causes you care about.
Yes. Donate, volunteer, spread the word.
Every little bit helps.
It really does.
Okay. So as we wrap up this deep dive into democracy awakening, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with?
You know, it's simple but powerful. American democracy is not a given.
It's not just going to magically keep working.
No, it takes effort. It takes work.
It's a constant struggle.
It is. It's an ongoing experiment.
And we're all part of it.
We are, and that means we have to actively participate.
We have to defend it.
Yes, and hold those in power accountable.
So well said.
There's a link to buy the book in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share it with anyone who loves exploring ideas. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those minds curious and engaged.